It's time for Yamhill County Tomorrow, a service of KLYC. OregonEVChargeRebates.com is a proud supporter of Yamhill County Tomorrow. Here's your host, Todd Edwards.
KLYC, good morning. It's time for another edition of Yamhill County Tomorrow. I'm Todd Edwards. I'm joined today by General Manager Wes Simpkins of KLYC and the General Manager of McMinnville Water and Light, John Dietz. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning, Todd.
And we're talking today about electric vehicles, electric charging stations, and all of the infrastructure that goes along with that. Wes is very involved with and very passionate about electric vehicles and all of that. So, Wes, tell us a little bit about your involvement with electric vehicles and charging stations.
Just like I said last week, and I'll say it now for John to hear, I got involved because a couple of years ago, both of my brothers bought electric vehicles, and they were really limited on their travel abilities. When they went to Smithfield, Virginia from Raleigh, North Carolina to visit my mother, they had to stay at one particular hotel because it was the only hotel in the area that had EV chargers. So that kind of limited them. And one of the big discussions we had was the lack of charging infrastructure across the United States. And John, I got this big interest in it, and I really got interested when ODOT announced they were going to start doing a rebate program for businesses. Because to me, that's just awesome, because it's going to spring into that nice infrastructure where if you've got an EV, you got a place to go charge. And it's not going to be expensive to charge, because most places, especially in Yamhill County, they're only charging maybe 29 cents a kilowatt, unless it's a DC fast charge, and then you're looking at 49 cents. Now, when I got to looking into rebates, of course, first place I went was to our local power company's website to see if you guys were offering any incentives. I don't see any on the website. Are you going to offer incentives or rebates or any kind of incentives for this?
At this time, no. What we're actually going to start looking at is what we call an integrated resource plan to figure out the energy that we're going to need for the increase in consumption because of EVs, and not only EVs, but also electrification in general. A lot of moving from gas to electric, like furnaces or hot water heating or those types of things.
That's interesting. The government's made this big push to go to all electric, and California and Oregon passed laws, and now the federal government offers tax incentives. So does that push the limits of the electricity system or the power system in Yamhill County?
So, well, we just serve McMinnville, and we serve about a 75 square mile area in Yamhill County. And we're what is called since we're a municipal utility, we're called a preference customer of the Bonneville Power Administration. Okay, so most of our energy comes from the Bonneville Power Administration, and that energy is generated from what they call the federal hydro system and one nuclear project. That system is pretty much at the limit of its generation capacity. And so why we're doing an integrated resource plan is to look at where we're going to get additional resources, energy resources. EV charging, they're talking it could be anywhere from 2 to 3 times increase in our demand or grid.
Yep.
So that's what we're worried about, is where is the energy going to come from to supply that? The other piece of that is we're actually looking at how we're going to expand or increase the size of our grid.
That was going to be my next question, was being able to increase the grid to keep up with the demand. You know, I know some areas, I don't know if you've looked into this, but I'm sure you have. I'm sure you know a lot more than I do about this. I noticed that, or I've been told that some areas are having to go to charging at night when demand is less. Is that something that may have to be on the horizon for our area?
Right now, it's not, but yes, that may be. And what you would basically do is some type of rate, what we call time of use rates, where the rate may be higher during peak times to kind of incentivize people to charge or do other things with electricity on off-peak times to kind of smooth the demand on the electric grid. California does some of that. Their issue is they're actually certain times of the year they have resource deficits where they need to import power from other areas to meet their demands.
Yeah, they have a lot of issues.
Yeah, we don't want to be like them.
No, not at all. I know that I've spoken with a couple of the manufacturers of the charging stations about the software that they utilize, and their software is capable. Let's say the customer is going to be charged a peak rate, the one that has the charging station. Let's say the peak rate is 22 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that. Well, they're going to have to charge more for the customer, but what they can also do is give them an incentive. If you'll charge at night, we'll make you part of our club, and we'll give you, for X amount a month, we'll give you so much free during the night. So that looks like it's probably a great way to help out with the grid and the power that can be consumed. But I have seen where that consumption, I mean, already now we're talking in 7 years, it's going to be 10 times worse.
And so one of our concerns is, currently the way with gas, we may put 7 to 10 customers on a distribution transformer. The green transformer that's at a subdivision, in a subdivision. With EV charging, that will overload those transformers. And so we're going to have to look at basically installing larger wire, fewer transformers, because we'll have more customers with larger loads on those transformers. And what that does to our costs for basically the distribution portion of the grid. We're what you would call a distribution utility. We buy power, and then we distribute that power through our distribution system.
Right.
So that is going to be a significant impact on our local electric grid.
Okay. When do you think that those upgrades are going to be actually needed?
I think it's probably 5 to 10 years out for us. One of the things we've done already is when we've already started to put, when we come into an area and we have to either new infrastructure, underground in particular, what we're doing is we're actually putting in larger conduit than we need, so we don't have to come back later and have to tear it up and replace it, which will help on the cost. But I think there's going to be a number of strategies. It's going to be, some type of time of use. It's going to be infrastructure upgrades. It's going to be looking at how we increase the amount of, energy we have in the system. And the other thing I don't think people realize, for a utility like us, our energy is we're already at about 96% carbon free. So we have no fossil fuel generation in our system. What we have is what was called that last piece is unspecified resources. We don't know where the energy comes from. But most of our energy is already carbon free and has been for decades.
That's awesome.
So
That's really worth mentioning, especially
Yeah.
On KOIC and KOIC TV. Now, I talked to some of the other power companies that don't offer rebates or incentives. What they do is they get these new customers in. If they have to upgrade a transformer or whatever they've got to do, they don't charge the customer for it. Is that something you guys are doing?
So typically, the way our policy is set up is the customer pays up front. Now, if there's an existing transformer there, we will credit that back if we have to put a larger one in. If it's added load, let's say, the subdivision or whatever's been existing, as long as the customer notifies us of increased load, those costs we absorb. So the customer doesn't pay for those things. If they put load in and damage the infrastructure, we will charge for that. So the idea is that to incentivize people to let us know you're adding load so that we can come in and plan for that added load. Because if you don't do that, that's going to damage the system. And then we will come back and charge you for that after the fact.
Yeah, I was talking to a local contractor who's bidding on projects here in Yamhill County. And one of the discussions I had with them was McMinnville Water and Light. And he actually told me one of the important things is when we install one of these stations, we need to go to the power company and let them know this is what the load is going to be so that they can look and make sure it's going to handle the load.
Exactly.
So I saw that coordination effort, and I thought that was very commendable of Cunard Electric to do that. That's one of our sponsors, and I talk to Mike all the time about it. And he tells me a lot of this stuff as I'm going along. I'm trying to learn because I've got it in my sights to buy an electric vehicle, but I don't want to do it till I can actually use the vehicle and not have to worry about running out of juice.
Right. And I know, like you mentioned ODOT, they have a program for installing charging stations, but the problem for us is that we're not on one of the primary highways that they're focused on first. We're kind of on the second or third tier.
Well, they did release part of that system being in areas like rural areas like, well, they actually have McMinnville on their list in Yamhill County, or on the list as the lower, I guess what they call the higher priority due to, shoot, I forget how they worded. I just looked it up yesterday too. It's heck getting old, but
it's probably tied to rural.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's part of our problem here is we're kind of what you would classify as big rural, because McMinnville's 35,000, so
right.
It's hard for us to get grants because they either look at a smaller entity or the much larger urban areas.
The grants that we found in our research last week, the largest grant to folks like you guys was $200,000.
Yeah,
I'm like, $200,000 ain't gonna touch what they need,
No.
So I thought that was kind of funny, but ODOT did prioritize our area for people installing the EV chargers, and they're offering some awesome rebates starting next month. They just haven't said when they're going to do it. So basically, most of the contractors are collecting people just going under an agreement for now to where they can all fire that paperwork over to ODOT and see if they can get the 17 to 22,000 from them in a grant or in a rebate. And because then they got 270 days to finish the construction process. So it's like everybody's fighting for $1.75 million in public funding.
Well, and you have to remember the charging station, there's multiple types of charging stations. So you have tier 1, which is 120 volt, tier 2 or type 2, which is 240 volt, which is what you would put in your house. And then you have the DC quick charge type
Right,
station.
that's tier 3.
That's tier 3, and those require 3-phase service. So those you can't put in your house.
Right.
Yeah,
The
those-
tier 2 is what, the level 2 is what's
Yeah.
going in at most businesses, a 4-port level 2 system or an 8-port level 2 system.
Yeah.
Is what
But-
most people are putting in.
Yeah, and the tier 3, you know, those are the ones that have the really high demands on the electric grid.
Yep. I know a couple of local business wanted to go to the level 3 system because it is a DC fast charge. So, but they said it's expensive. You want to put in a level 3 system. That's at least $100,000.
Yeah.
To do a DC fast charge.
I know that we've been talking with a couple of auto dealers here in town, so I think they're moving forward with putting in, you know, both level 2s and level 3s.
Yeah, there's no rebates for the level 3s. So, I mean, that's all out of pocket, but they can get up. I think the FCC says, or the federal government says, it's going to be 30% with a cap of 30,000, but the DC chargers may go up more. They're still discussing it in Congress. So, you know, we'll see how that works. But if the auto dealers are going to go to those level 3s, we'll be looking at that infrastructure upgrade before too long, because that will tax us pretty bad.
Yeah, and those will drive our demand pretty fast.
I hear you. So with the higher demand, or you're going to have to increase your price per kilowatt hour, aren't you?
No, what we'll be looking at is it's not the demand, or the adding the load is not the driver of the cost. What the driver of the cost is actually finding the resources to meet that load. So right now, you know, we're with Bonneville, trying to remember exactly, we're somewhere around, I think commercial rate is around 4.5 cents to 5 cents a kilowatt hour. But if we have to go out and invest in new resources, those can be just our cost can be 60 cents, or, you know, can range anywhere from, depending on the resource, roughly 6 cents a kilowatt to maybe even 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And then we have to distribute the power. So we have to add on top of that. So
Right.
you know, that gets melded into our system at that point. And that's when the cost goes up, is when you add all those newer resources that are going to cost more and meld with the existing resource.
That's understandable. John, I appreciate you jumping on the show with us today, and I hopefully we'll stay in touch, because as the demand increases, we would love to discuss with you how it's playing into what Mac Power's doing for the local community, because you know, you guys are our go-to folks for juice.
Yeah, so you know, we do participate also in the state's clean fuels credit program. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so you know, we are using those funds to basically plan for this contingent, you know, this event. That's what we're going to do with those funds.
Well, at least they got that. Doesn't the federal government participate in that too?
That I don't know. They may, but I know this. You know, we are actually getting those credits through the state.
Right. I think the federal government's giving the state part of it. I can't remember. I talked to somebody about it a couple of months ago, and I can't exactly remember what the response was. But that is a good thing, that you can use those credits and be able to do the expansion.
Definitely.
So, John, we don't want to take too much of your time, because we know you're a busy man and you got a lot of things on your hands. Do have one more question. How long have you been the GM over there at McMinnville Water and Light?
It will be 6 years in November.
Did you come from here locally, or did you live somewhere else before you came over here?
Prior to that, I was the engineering and operations manager here.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I have a degree in electrical engineering.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome. My son's shooting for that. Purdue University. I think he just got a few more credit hours left and he'll be an electrical engineer. So anyhow, I'll let you go. I won't take too much more of your time. And look, we appreciate you being on here with us.
Okay, well, thank you.
And we'll talk at you again soon.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Thank you, John.
Bye.
Todd, I think we got some great answers.
Holy smokes, he's awesome.
Yeah. I'm really glad because it's something that everybody's been curious about. What is Mac Power going to do?
Right.
And he said it, we could be close to maxing
Capacity.
the grid.
Yeah.
And so they're already looking at resources to replace that power. Because he's right, California,
Oh, yeah.
they're in a world of crap when it comes to their power grids. So, and he's right. Oregon don't want to be like that.
No, they don't.